So we'll be talking about decoding direct pay. It's a form of a tax credit. I'm Joby Bernstein, an MBA and an MS student with a background in climate finance and climate policy.
And I'm Felipe Galvis-Delgado. I am an MA student and MS student with a climate development background and policy background.
And together we have 10 plus years of experience in climate finance and climate policy. So why should you care about tax credits? The Inflation Reduction Act, yes, it's a climate bill, but in reality, it's a tax bill. There are potentially going to be $1 trillion in tax credits over the next 10 years. $1 trillion, if you stack dollar bills from the floor here, all the way up, that would be 81,000 miles. It gets you a third of the way to the moon. And this is our money, your taxpayer dollars that we're spending. And so the IRA extended old renewable tax credits, but also created new ones. And a new important program is something called direct pay. Direct pay is a program that allows tax-exempt entities to be able to get tax credits. So what is a tax-exempt entity? Think of this as a tribe, a state or a local government, a rural co-op, or other charities such as a church. And so direct pay is a provision that basically allows all of these tax-exempt entities to get a tax credit in the form of a cash payment. So let's say the city of Palo Alto wants to build a solar farm. It's going to cost $100 million. They can receive a 30% cash payment to incentivize that project.
All right, so why should we all care about tax credits, right? Like, how does this fit into our E-IPER education? Well, we think clean energy tax credits are the perfect combination of science, policy, business, law, sustainability. And there are really two main areas of focus that we think are relevant here. The first one is decarbonization. So by 2035, according to the Rhodium Group, the IRA tech-neutral tax credits could reduce emissions in the US power sector by 73%, which is equivalent to 300 million metric tons of carbon. And a share of this reduction is going to come from direct pay, although we don't know exactly how much yet. And then importantly, direct pay is key to the last mile decarbonization because it targets tax-exempt entities that serve communities in hard-to-reach areas for decarbonization. But what's also cool about direct pay is that while it's important for last mile decarbonization, it ensures that these communities are not the last to decarbonize. And this is where energy equity comes in, because before the IRA, the tax-exempt entities had never been eligible for tax credits, for clean energy tax credits, and now they are, and 30% of Americans receive electricity from these entities. Now, what's the problem, right? The problem really is uptake. So from 100,000 entities that could apply, only 700 have so far, which is a big problem, right? And the main methods that we used to delve into this issue was we had sort of a three-pronged approach. So the first one was informational interviews. We spoke with officials from the federal government, from local state governments, and then we also talked to the middlemen, the lawyers, the accountants, the tax advisors, which are important to make these deals work. We also did some case studies to delve deeper into these issues, which Joby's going to talk about. And then we also did a literature review where we read the regulatory guidance that's out there. We found out what resources are out there and really got an idea of what the gaps are where we could fill.
So one of our case studies is SMUD. It is Sacramento's utility. And they're building a $230 million solar farm, hoping to get $90 million tax credit. They have a team of 5 people that are working on this, but as they've been working through it, like getting the paperwork done is half the battle. So it's sort of this information problem and trying to figure out how to do this for the first time. Another case study we're working with is TCC, the Tanana Chief Conference. They represent 37% of federal tribes in the state of Alaska, the size of Texas. And they're building their first solar farm. But for them, one of their early issues was how do we get funding for this? Because we're not a large profitable developer. We don't have a balance sheet. So how do we get up this upfront capital to start the project? And so using these 2 case studies, along with talking to a dozen other tax-exempt entities, 2 main problems were really synthesized. The first is this information problem. You're tax-exempt, you've never filed taxes, you don't know how to. And so understanding what steps to take was tough. The second part is this timing. you can't get a tax credit until you finish building the wind or the solar or whatever project that may be. Getting the money to start developing and permitting up front is important. So what did we do? We built a website. And why did we build a website? Because we were literally told to. These tax-exempt entities realized that they don't have a friendly website to go to serve as a resource. There are resources out there. They go in, they're very comprehensive. I promise you, they're not navigable one bit. And that's where we come in to fill this gap, where we're gonna have this resource that serves as a hub for organizations to get up to speed fast, to get connected to technical assistance, and to see examples of success stories. And so I can give you a quick run through of what we've been building. This is our homepage right now, where you can easily click to get to the beginner's guide. From here, you have an ability to learn more about what the tax credits actually are, what are the forms you need to fill out, and then how do you actually start the process? What milestones you need to hit? Where do you get that capital up front to learn more about that? And then a place to highlight success stories. And then lastly, getting connected to technical assistance is extremely important. Our lovely faces are here as well. And so it's a great place to really get started for organizations to understand this process.
Yeah, important disclaimer right there. All right, so for our theory of change. So the reason we built this website is because, right, the information problem is big, and we want to raise awareness, improve the education on direct pay. We think more education leads to more clean energy projects, especially in these by these tax-exempt entities, which are in disadvantaged communities. So that will lead to further decarbonization, an improvement in energy equity, and that will lead to success stories, which will sort of snowball back all the way to the education, and then it'll be a feedback loop. So from our analysis, we really saw three main needs. The first one was connecting the dots for technical assistance. So we spoke to federal officials that told us, well, you know, there's a lot of resources out there. Like, there's technical assistance from the DOE, from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, from USDA, and then we spoke to the tax-exempt entities, and they said we need more technical assistance, and so there was a disconnect there where the federal officials told us, well, while there are these resources out there, there's not really one hub that sort of like directs everyone to the program that they need. So this is really what we try to do on our website and one of our pages. The second thing is success stories. We heard from tax-exempt entities that if they could find out how to do this, and if they could have some like examples, then that would really help them. That would encourage them to do it. And then the third thing is just an explainer on like how to develop a clean energy project and the ownership models. And so like, for example, for the project development process, it is very, very difficult, right? You got to do engineering analysis. You got to do project economics. You got to figure out how to construct the project, who's going to operate. All of these things that the direct pay entities likely don't know how to do. So we give them a Dev 101 on our website, but we also recognize that they might not be able to do this, so we give them some other options for ownership models so that they can take up the program.
So what are some limitations we know we're going to face? One, hitting it again, we are not tax advisors or tax lawyers. If you're going to go and build a $230 million project, the best advice we can give you is to get a tax lawyer. We also need to ensure that users are going to engage with this website, and that to keep the website updated over time, because guidance changes, laws change. And lastly, we have limited data so far of our trial users. We've sent it out to some of our case studies and just awaiting some feedback on how to make changes.
Right, so for our implementation strategy, we need your help. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to publish the website. It's going to be radirectpay.org, so stay tuned for that. But we'd love for you all to check it out, give us feedback, share it with your networks. The second thing we're going to do is talk to our networks, talk to the folks that we've connected with throughout this project, which was a couple dozen, and get them to essentially share it with their networks as well. Hope for a first snowball effect. And lastly, we'd love to partner with a leader within this space so that they can feature us, we can feature them, and maybe in the future they can sort of take ownership. So I think in conclusion, we'll leave you with this. One of our interviewees said that direct pay is the largest potential free capital source for tax-exempt entities. We think this is significant, and we think today the take-up is just not enough, but with education and awareness, which is what our website tries to do, we think the potential is limitless, which is fantastic for decarbonization and for improving energy equity.
So for next steps, one, we're looking for a partner to can co-publish this work. Second, in 2025, a tax bill is likely going to come up. We are hoping that direct pay is featured, is not on the chopping block, and hopefully success stories published on this website, and also getting more entities up to speed and starting projects. Because once you start a project, you can't really take that back. So getting projects out as fast as possible is important. Personally, I don't have a job yet, so maybe one of these companies will hire me.
And then through my work at Pattern Energy, I'm hoping to partner with some of these entities to help them through the process.
Awesome. So yeah, that's our presentation. Thank you all so much. Nice job.
She's seen this presentation 5 times, so this is gonna be a tough one.
I'm wondering through some of the other things that were mentioned, like Francis's presentation on the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Are there incentives in those programs to tell some of these organizations about how direct pay works?
Yeah, I mean, we're hoping some of the organizations we've talked to are ones that were also featured in Fran's presentation as well. So like Coalition for Green Capital is one where the hope is that they can take that money and stack on other potential direct payments. The biggest issue is there's this problem that, like in federal government funding, you can't get sources from 2 places. So you can't get a federal grant and also a federal tax credit. That's considered like a double benefit, and that's illegal. But there are certain ways to sort of get through that, loopholes there. So yes, it's like they're important organizations to work with, but part of our website talks about those financial limitations, is that you have to be careful, because if you take federal money, you may not then be able to get a tax credit, or you'll take a 20% or 15% discount.
Yeah, and to add to that, one of our featured organizations that we didn't talk about is the Nevada Clean Energy Fund, which is the green bank in Nevada, which was created by the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, and they provide technical assistance with direct pay as well. So, yeah.
I've heard anecdotally that with a lot of these programs, while there is theoretically like government technical advice available, it's actually very hard to get a hold of folks and get specific assistance. Yeah. With the projects you spoke to, does that seem to be the case, or is there enough resourcing on the government side to give this advice and get projects through?
What do you think from our case studies?
I think it's been mixed. Some have been like, wow, the government's been there every step of the way, and they've been responsive. Others have said, like, I literally clicked next, and now I can't go back. I don't know, and like the website will not let me go back, and I'm stuck. And no, I can't talk to anyone to fix that. So in some cases, it works really well. I think it's what people you're actually dealing with. But I think overall, I'd say generally people have been positive and impressed.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm really curious about some of the maybe I'll call it organizational dynamics at some of these tax exempt entities. Like SMUD is already a utility. It makes sense that they would build a solar farm.
Right.
But a tribal land, what kind of expertise do they have in-house to even know how to find a project developer for this? We've talked about I've heard you talk about libraries and other sorts of entities that are just so far from energy developers. And I'm wondering who in these organizations takes on these projects? How do they know to take them on? Some of those questions I'm really curious about.
Yeah, so an organization we spoke to is the Clean Tribal Alliance, which is just a larger organization that helps tribes either develop their own projects or figure out how to essentially obtain ownership of some clean energy projects. So there's some organizations out there that help them out, and they tend to be clean energy attorneys. So we point them to that in our website. But I think, it's a great point, and I sort of touched on it, is the development process is really, really difficult. And so, but an alternative ownership model that they can do is they can do a build transfer agreement where, they partner with a private developer, and then the developer does everything, and then once it's ready to go, it's just a turnkey agreement, here you go, and then maybe the developer takes on the operations but then the ownership stays within, for example, the tribe, and then the tribe can monetize the tax credits.
I had a kind of similar question, which is just like what's the original or like the most common initial motivation for some of these things? Like, for example, utilities makes a lot of sense. Like tribes or like schools or churches who are like not supplying kind of like your main source of energy. I'm curious, like from the people that you've talked to, what is the driving motivation? Is it like energy independence or lowering overall energy use? I'm just curious, like what gets them to even start this journey?
So for tribes, it's energy sovereignty. They don't want to get their power from a utility, right? There's like a trust issue, and they would much rather develop their own projects and have their own energy and be like sort of self-reliant. And then with nonprofits and schools, there's a lot of interest in, for example, doing like rooftop solar, which they can qualify for these tax credits, as well as like electrified buses, so that kids don't have to be around, the pollution that comes from like these big school bus, like diesel buses. So I think that those are some of the considerations.
Yeah, I think for the last 17 years, in terms of renewable energy subsidies, have only gone to private developers. Any of these tax-exempt organizations haven't had a chance to play. And so this at least gives them the opportunity to be on the same playing field, where beforehand, the private sector was getting a 30% to 50% discount, and everyone else was like, oh, I can't even get involved. It does raise a question of who should actually be developing projects and who shouldn't, but at least it opens up that opportunity. And one thing that we heard was, this is like the largest source of free capital that exists for any like charity out there today. So for people who are looking to potentially develop these projects to cut down their energy costs or to sell it back to the grid, it is a huge opportunity to get money that just doesn't exist elsewhere.